Hello everyone, and welcome back. If you thought Salem had already reached its breaking point, the next 2 weeks of Days of Our Lives may prove that the real chaos is only just beginning. Because from March 23rd through April 3rd, this show is setting up not just shocking twists, but emotional fallout that could change multiple lives at once. So in this video, let's break down the biggest storylines coming up over the next 2 weeks on Days of Our Lives, and why several of these developments may be even more dangerous than they first appear. Let's begin with Rachel Black, because this may be the most emotionally devastating storyline of the entire 2-week stretch. At first, there is a small sign that Rachel may be trying to grow. If she gives Brady her blessing to date Sarah, that moment could suggest she is making an effort to be more mature and more accepting of the people around her. On the surface, that may seem like progress. But that fragile progress may not survive what comes next. Because once Rachel stands before Judge Dabney, this story stops being about family protection and starts becoming about consequences. Belle may do everything in her power to keep Rachel from facing criminal charges over the EJ shooting, but legal help may only go so far when the deeper issue is Rachel's emotional condition. This may not be a question of whether Rachel deserves punishment. It may be a question of whether she is truly stable enough to remain outside a controlled environment. If Marlena refuses to support Kristen's version of events and instead gives her honest professional opinion, then Rachel's fate could change in an instant. That would put Marlena in an impossible position. If she admits that Kristen took Rachel out of Bayview before Rachel was truly ready, then Marlena may be protecting Rachel's long-term mental health while also destroying Kristen's argument in court. That is the kind of truth that may be necessary, but it could also blow this family apart. And Kristen is almost certainly not going to stay calm. If the ruling sends Rachel back to treatment, or into another form of confinement, Kristen may completely unravel. Her reaction could turn the hearing into a full emotional explosion, especially if she blames Marlena for betraying the family. And once that happens, Brady may be pulled into the middle yet again. Because Brady may understand why Marlena is telling the truth, but he also knows Rachel is the one who will pay the price. So this may become less about who is right and more about how much pain this family is willing to endure in order to face reality. Now here is where the Rachel story may turn from tragic to deeply unsettling. Marlena may discover that Rachel is still communicating with Sophia Choi, and that detail could change everything. Because if Rachel is still in contact with Sophia, then Rachel may not just be dealing with the fallout of her own actions. She may be caught in an ongoing pattern of manipulation. That possibility makes Rachel look even more vulnerable, because Sophia has shown that she knows exactly how to work through other people instead of attacking directly. Sophia does not need chaos to be obvious. She creates it quietly. She plants ideas, applies pressure, and lets emotionally fragile people carry out the damage. So if Marlena finds text messages between Rachel and Sophia, she may realize that Rachel is still being influenced at the worst possible time, just as her future is hanging in the balance. And that could make Rachel's hearing even more painful. Because now the issue is not only whether Rachel made terrible choices. It is whether she was also being emotionally steered by someone far more calculated than anyone around her realized. If Marlena sees that clearly, then her concern may intensify very quickly. That would make the whole storyline even sadder. Because Rachel may not only be facing judgment from the court, she may also be trapped in a toxic connection she is not strong enough to break on her own. Now let's talk about Holly and Tate, because this may be the storyline that delivers the biggest shock of the next 2 weeks. Everything seems to be building toward one crucial discovery. The pills in Holly's skincare supplement bottle may reveal the truth behind Sophia's entire setup. And the way this may happen is especially effective. Tate appears poised to take some of Holly's supplement himself, and if that happens, his emotional state could spiral fast. At first, that may look like stress, anger, or another personal blow-up. But once his behavior starts lining up with what Holly has already been experiencing, the pattern may become impossible to ignore. Because when Holly and Tate realize the pills were not vitamins at all, but antipsychotic medication, the truth may suddenly snap into focus. Holly's disturbing lab results may finally make sense. Tate may realize why emotions were escalating so fast, and both of them may begin to understand that this was not random at all, it was planned. It is not only about catching Sophia. It is about realizing how much damage she may have already caused before anyone understood what was happening. Holly may feel violated, manipulated, and furious. Tate may feel guilt for not seeing the warning signs sooner, especially if he now understands how close he came to being pulled into the same trap. And if Rachel helped Sophia in any way, even without fully understanding the consequences, that could widen the fallout even further. Sophia may try to deny everything. She may try to twist the story before the evidence closes in. But once Holly and Tate start connecting the pills, the lab results, and Sophia's motives, it may become much harder for her to stay in control. And the more trapped Sophia feels, the more reckless she may become. Another key storyline over these next 2 weeks centers on Sean, Jada, and Belle. And while it may not look as explosive as the courtroom or pill swap drama, it could become one of the most emotionally important arcs in this entire stretch. Sean is still recovering from his leg injury, which means he is in a physically weakened position and, more importantly, an emotionally vulnerable one. That is exactly why Jada's move-in offer matters so much. On paper, it may seem simple: practical help, temporary support, someone making sure Sean is not alone while he heals. But in Salem, those arrangements rarely stay practical for long. Because once two people begin sharing space during a difficult time, emotional lines can start shifting very quickly. Daily closeness creates comfort, comfort creates trust, and trust can open the door to a deeper connection before either person fully realizes it is happening. If Sean accepts the offer, Jada may become more than just someone helping him recover. She may become the person who is present during his pain, his frustration, and his most unguarded moments. That kind of emotional access can be powerful, especially when someone is trying to rebuild both physically and mentally after trauma. And Belle may feel the change immediately. Because while Sean leans more on Jada, Belle may be forced to watch from a distance as another woman steps into a space that once felt like hers. That could stir up jealousy, regret, or even the painful realization that Sean may be finding peace somewhere else. It is not built on one huge shock. It is built on emotional movement, and on a soap. That kind of quiet shift is often what changes relationships for good. Now let's move to Johnny, Chanel, and baby Trey, because this storyline could become one of the most frustrating and emotionally draining parts of the next 2 weeks. The reason is simple. Johnny and Chanel may be getting close enough to imagine a real future with Trey, and that is exactly when the ground may start collapsing beneath them. Sophia is expected to show up at the adoption hearing and argue that her biological son should go to another couple instead of Johnny and Chanel. That move alone is enough to create immediate chaos, but the real emotional damage comes from timing. This is not a disruption arriving early, before anyone gets attached. It is arriving after hope has already had time to grow. And once hope enters an adoption story, the stakes become much more painful. Because Johnny and Chanel may not just be fighting for a legal outcome at this point. They may be fighting for the family they have already started picturing in their minds. That is what makes Sophia's move feel so cruel and destabilizing. She may not just be challenging a decision. She may be tearing into something deeply personal just as it begins to feel real. If Sophia manages to make a persuasive case, then Johnny and Chanel may be forced to face the terrifying possibility that their future with Trey could disappear almost overnight. And even if the judge does not immediately side with her, the hearing itself could still shake their confidence and leave them emotionally bracing for heartbreak. Whatever they learn next seems likely to have major consequences for their future as a family. It could bring hope, it could bring disappointment, or it could leave them in an even more uncertain position than before. But no matter what form it takes, this storyline feels like it is building toward a major emotional turning point. Finally, there is the Lexi Carver situation, and this may be the storyline quietly waiting to explode by the end of this 2-week stretch. Spoilers suggest Lexi is on the verge of waking up, and if that happens, the emotional consequences could be immediate. Because once Lexi regains consciousness, the truth surrounding this situation may become much harder to control, delay, or soften. The real threat may not be the wake-up itself. It may be what follows once Abe and Theo are forced to confront the full reality of what has happened. Paulina is already carrying emotional pressure, which suggests she understands just how serious the fallout could be. But once the people closest to Lexi are no longer being shielded from the truth, everything may change very quickly. Because family shock on Days of Our Lives is never just about information being revealed. It is about timing, emotional impact, and the damage caused by learning something too late. If Abe and Theo are blindsided, their reactions could send a whole new wave of grief, anger, and helplessness through the family. It may stay quieter than the other plots for a while, but once it breaks open, it could deliver one of the most powerful emotional blows of this entire preview period. And if the show wants to end these 2 weeks on a major family shock, Lexi's wake up may be the twist that does it. So overall, the next 2 weeks of Days of Our Lives look packed with exactly the kind of drama that keeps Salem fans hooked. Courtroom tension, emotional manipulation, lab results that expose the truth, romantic shifts, family heartbreak, and secrets that are getting harder and harder to contain. The biggest question now is not whether the truth will come out. It is who will be strong enough to survive the fallout when it does. Because from Rachel's devastating hearing, to Sophia's twisted plan unraveling, to Johnny and Chanel's uncertain future, these next 2 weeks may push multiple characters to their emotional limits. And once Salem starts cracking, it rarely stops with just one family.